The most frequent problems that I hear with orchestras playing M to the third power at a competition or a festival, I already went over in the other videos, and those are going to be the different finger patterns that the viola section has when they play their soli section. A lot of times that's out of tune. And the other thing that I typically hear is lack of articulation. But in this video, we're going to go over some of the small spots where we need to pay a little bit more attention to detail and come up with some strategies on how to teach effectively so that this piece can really sparkle. 33 through 37. I mentioned this earlier with 28 and 29, but these are compound measures in 3/8, but they're not marked short, they're legato. And most of the time when the orchestra is playing the 3/8, the third note is short. Sometimes I'll hear the orchestra continue that pattern or simply play everything short. Human beings are very good at recognizing patterns. We're good at following patterns, and sometimes following those patterns leads to mistakes. And this is one of those instances here. The pattern's set up for us, and it sets us up to make a mistake. From 33 to 37, we need to play that section legato. So look out for that and make sure your students are aware. The basses really need to hold down the tempo here. And sometimes they don't understand how to do that. They have a simple job to do, but we need to make sure that they understand how to do their job effectively. It's marked mezzo piano here, but when's the last time you've ever heard a conductor say, oh, that pizzicato is too loud? Hardly ever. And so get your bassist to play out a little bit more and really establish the beat, and get your bassist to watch and follow you so that your cellos and viola players don't slow down. As we approach that passage from measure 60 to 64, we have some really cool rhythmic counterpoint here where the low strings are coming in on the and of one. And it's really fun to play. I really like the effect. They've got that accent to highlight the upbeat, which is pretty cool. But sometimes they're not quite together. You need to make sure that they're setting their bows in the rest and they're ready to play, the up bows. In 61, 62, and 63, cellos have beat one and the and of one, where basses only have the ands, so they need to be setting their bows every single time so that they're right in time with the cellos when the cellos play their accented notes. If the students aren't prepared to play, they're likely to play late, and that's typically what happens in this section. The very first cello up bow in 60 can sometimes be late if they don't prepare it well. All of the bass up bows can be late as well. Now, the cellos are not likely to get behind in 61, 62, 63 because they have one and the and of one. So it's just about getting those bass players in tempo for those three measures. If we look ahead in measure 102, the first violins get a turn. Now, 98, 99, 100, and 101, we no longer have those offbeats and the low strings. It's just in violins and violas here, and everybody rests on the and of one. In 98, the cellos and basses have beat one, nothing on the and of one, whereas before they were playing on the and of one. And then violins and violas have the 16th notes coming into beat one, and then everybody rests on the and of one, and it goes that way into 102, where everybody comes down to piano, which is the softest dynamic indicator in M to the third power. In 102, the basses are now arco instead of pizzicato like they were in 64. But they're marked short. You still don't want them to play too soft because they're going to help keep everything in tempo. They shouldn't be playing thunderously loud, but If they're playing short enough, you can get away with playing it a little louder, and it won't make as big a difference because less total sound, it won't cover anything up. If you overlay the first violin part here at 102 with the viola cello part here at 64, you'll notice that they're identical for the most part. So a good way to practice this might be to have all of those people playing at the same time to kind of woodshed it, slow it down, and get them to play with the right articulation and marcato style, and gradually speed it up. If you want to include your second violins, that would be great. You can achieve this a couple of different ways. Either write it out for them, and you could write it out for the basses too. If you want to buy extra parts to put in front of them, they're only $1.25, so that's not going to really break the bank there. Or what you can do is just get students to stand up and move. You can have your first violin and second violin inside players trade spots, and if they all have a copy of their own music, the second violins who are now sitting by first violins, all they got to do is read what's on the stand. The first violins that are now sitting with the second violins need to take their own music and put it on the stand so that your second violinist can see what they're supposed to be doing. And that way the second violinist can get a turn playing this as well, and that'll give them something to do. With the basses, you can write this out for them also, but I kind of like to have them play those quarter notes just to keep everybody in tempo and get them lots of repetition, because that part is so important when it comes to staying together. And I think it also stylistically, that bass part kind of provides the groove and helps drive this piece forward. Look out for these spots, 106 through 109. Second violins have these tied dotted quarter notes with the C sharp. Getting that in tune can be kind of tricky. That's going to require some isolation. When you're playing this and you're building this chord here, you want your basses to be playing an A. They have the seventh here, which is kind of reminiscent of the anacrusis into this whole piece. If you want to tune this chord the easiest way, have your basses play the A, which is the second eighth note, which is the root of the A7 chord, or A42 chord, if you want to get technical. And that way, your second violins can tune against that, the C sharp against that A. It's the same thing here. Measure 115, 116, 117. The exact same thing. And what you're going to want to do is, again, build this chord A, C sharp, E, and E and viola as well. The fifth is doubled. If you want to provide extra support, you can have your first violins play A as well. That might be useful so that the root is doubled instead of the fifth being doubled from viola to first violins on the first eighth note. You could have them play A2. That might be helpful as well, just when you're block tuning that chord so that your second violins are intoning that C sharp and they know where it's fitting within that A7 chord or A42 chord. In 142 and 143, it can be a little tricky because we're playing a D melodic minor scale, but your second violins, violas, cellos, and basses are dropping an octave midway through the scale. And this can create some confusion in the tuning. The ear might have trouble with that octave jump, and then now they have to hear the rest of the scale an octave lower. You might want to have them start playing the octave above, which is achievable for everybody to play on the A string. And then once they get that in their ears, you can have them play an octave lower and make sure that they can still do it. Part of the problem is the octave jump part of it is still learning that augmented finger pattern, making sure that they can get the C sharp high enough. When cellos play this pattern, they almost always extend with the second finger instead of with the fourth finger. So this is much more comfortable to play A, B, C sharp, instead of trying to go A, B, and then extending here to C sharp. I don't see really how we can keep that those fingers round and tunnel well enough, if we're doing that, it's going to kind of make the fingers start to collapse. When the cellos extend their second finger, also have them move the thumb, because the thumb and the second finger should almost always be connected when playing the cello. A lot of times players will forget, and it makes that extension a lot more difficult. And the augmented finger patterns become a lot more difficult as well. So have them move, when their second finger extends, you're going to have them move their thumb forward as well. Measure 150 to the end. We get some material that the first violins are required to shift in order to play these notes up here on the E string. If you've got students in your first violin section that aren't very comfortable with shifting and they're playing in a way that's making it difficult for others to tune, you might want to have them play an octave down so that they can play with your violins and your second violins and your violas. Learning where to shift makes a big difference for this section too. If you wait to shift too late, it makes it a lot more difficult. In measure 149, I like to shift on beat 2. So they have an open A here, and during that open A, they can shift up to the third finger, and it's regular third finger, major pattern, 2-3 pattern, and play this F natural, third finger, second finger for E, first finger for D. So we've got half step, whole step. Then when we rest, we're already in third position to play. We just need to cross strings, fourth finger for D, then regular third finger, that's a whole step from D to C natural, then another whole step from C natural to B flat, and then a half step to A. And I like to have them stay in position for this as well. Cross strings, play fourth finger G on the A string, regular third finger for F natural, and we have E, it's a half step, so major pattern, and then back up to F, and then now I have them shift back down for the D, then C natural, low 2, B flat, low 1, open A. For me, that works the best. That's the most convenient place to shift. I suppose if your students are terribly uncomfortable shifting, that strategy might not work the best, because the less they're in third position, the better. So in that case, you might want to just have them play D and B in third position and then shift back for the A. It might be the least amount of damage, but really, if you shift earlier on that open A, it's a pretty convenient place to shift. I did a whole video on shifting in season 1, so you might want to check that out and start getting your students more comfortable with shifting if they're that uncomfortable. When we start looking at 155, 156, which is the penultimate measure, again, I like to have them shift a little earlier. They can play the open A in 155, and while they're playing open A, they're going to shift up and play first finger for the D instead of third finger, because they're going to be in third position, and then first finger again for A on the E string, and then fourth finger. If they play 3 for D and they play 3 for A in first position and they shift up just for that D, it may not be as consistent. It's not as a convenient place to shift for them. But again, if they're really uncomfortable with shifting, well, that's just one note that's going to be out of tune instead of 9 notes. So I guess you might have to pick your poison there. My advice, though, is just to get your students comfortable with shifting, and that's going to solve a lot of problems. Yeah, not a lot of trouble spots to work on for this piece. Most of it's fairly achievable on its own as long as you get the basics in place. It kind of plays itself a little bit, and that's my take on M to the third power. If there's something that I didn't go over in here, a question that you have or a spot that your orchestra's having trouble with that you need some help with, please drop a comment in the comment section below and I'll try to help you with that. And also, if you know of a spot that you've had challenges with in the past and you develop some tips and tricks or some exercises in order to to achieve a technical deficiency or something. We'd like to hear from you too. We'd like to grow our community and share and learn things together. So please use the comments section for that so we can learn from each other and really build a good teaching community with kind of these standard pieces for these classifications. But I hope you enjoyed my video series for m to the third power, and we'll see you next time.